Hey, I'm Veronica from UXpression. Let me briefly introduce you to what we at UXpression do. UXpression is an online platform where you can build customer journey maps, impact maps, and personas for your organization. With more than 100 ready-to-use templates, you can speed up your persona creation and mapping processes. To help you build confidence on your journey and learn from other practitioners, we host community events on user, customer, employee experience, and all things journey mapping. Our speakers are industry experts that are willing to share their knowledge to help you design and build better products and services. We also speak at the events ourselves and share tips and tricks we learned through years of practice and numerous interviews with other mappers. On top of that, we have UXpression Academy, where you can dive into learning how to build journey maps, personas, and conduct interviews. And do that all at your own pace. Don't forget to check it out and enjoy the event. Based on our experience, it really seems like the topic of measuring the impact of journey mapping never gets old. We receive tons of questions from our users, from our event attendees, and this time we decided not to make another talk to have someone talking about their experience, but we decided to do a different thing, to invite three experts, three CX consultants who deal a lot with different clients, helping them to achieve their business results. And during today's event, they will talk about approaches and methods that can be used to ensure that the journey mapping initiative pays off. So let me introduce our panelists. Amy, Debbie, Leanne, thank you so much for joining us from, honestly, different parts of the world, from different time zones. So could you please tell us a little bit more about yourselves? So Amy, would you be the first?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. Very excited to talk with this group. My name is Amy Downs. I'm the CEO of Customer Obsessing Consulting. We're located in Europe, and we work primarily across Europe and the United States. I've got about 20 years in operator roles. So I basically built my professional career running teams on the post-sales side of the business. So mostly working with technology companies, CPaaS, SaaS, and other technologies. And today I have a team of three people. We work out of Europe. We're based in Germany, and we help companies across the customer journey, looking primarily at we work mostly with customer success teams, but we look at the journey mostly for B2B customers.
Thank you so much, Amy. Leanne, would you tell some words about yourself?
Yes, sure. Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me again. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I am in the dark. I've got some light, so it looks like it's during the day, but actually nighttime, but it's so great to be here. So I am CEO of Leanne Elledge Consulting. My background is medicine, and what we do is basically use sales and business psychology and the cognitive neuroscience to understand consumer behavior. And we work with clients to help them to ethically influence their customers. We use customer journey mapping extensively to understand where we can actually pitch and nudge customers using cognitive biases along their journey, from a psychological trigger to awareness, desire, research, blah, 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 purchase, post-purchase advocacy, and on for sustainable selling. So for us, it's very much neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience-based work that we do with customers and the journey mapping along the way.
Thank you, Leanne. And Debbie, who is located right in the middle between Amy and Leanne. Would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks, as always, to UXpression for having me back. And for those of you who are curious, look up our previous webinar that we did together about how to make customer journey maps more actionable. I'm Debbie from Delta CX. I have almost 30 years in CX and UX and strategy, working in research and design and a lot of strategic efforts with companies around there, from everything from their product market fit and their product and service strategy down to how they staff their teams, how collaboration works, who does what. And so we're just kind of larger change agents and a CX and UX consultancy. We don't do as many customer journey maps. We tend to do a task analysis. There's similarities across them. We're just a little bit more focused on the task and bringing in behavioral typologies to match that rather than using personas. Some of you know me from the YouTube channel, which was Delta CX, but we've started a new one. So please subscribe at Customer Experience, Customer Centricity. It's long, but you'll find me. And some of you might know my book. If not, please check it out. Customers Know You Suck.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, I believe this is high time that we move to the discussion, actually. So to start with, when we talk about the performance of journey mapping, we assume that, well, we didn't do it for no reason, right? Because like any other activities, it should serve not only the customers, but also the business itself. So, we never come to our boss saying like, hey, I want to do that thing that will take a lot of time from me. And, but it doesn't really have anything to do with your business goals or with the business strategy or whatever. So my question is, how can we set clear objectives and goals for journey mapping initiatives to ensure that the process is actually aligned with the business goals and the business strategy? Leanne, I see you're unmuted. Probably you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways to do that is actually do the journey mapping of the organization. So just because it's a customer journey map doesn't mean that it has to actually be external. It can be an internal stakeholder. So actually looking at, and I've done this with many clients, that actually looking at the steps, that's the internal process of what is it that we're trying to achieve at each stage. I mean, ultimately, with my experience, we're looking at sales and sales psych and how we can grow businesses and create a experience that is phenomenal and exceptional for our customers, but also for us. So it needs to have that equilibrium and be a win-win. So looking at the journey within the organization is one way that we can set some goals before we then create a journey for the external stakeholder, which is our customers and our clients.
Thank you, Leanne. Amy, Debbie, do you have something to chime in on that?
Sure, I can chime in. What we find is the executive alignment is really, really important. So I think anytime you're starting, especially in B2B, we work a lot with B2B SaaS companies. And we find that if we have buy-in from the CEOs and the executives are aligned around the initiative and the program, then you have a lot more acceptance. Because typically, we start journey mapping efforts. We're usually working with companies who haven't done this in the past. So it's kind of their first experience out of the gate and working with journey maps. And usually that the tip of the spear is with customer success teams in these B2B SaaS companies. And so what we typically find is if we start there, but we've got the executive alignment, the CEOs are sort of tied in, it's tied into strategic growth goals and net revenue retention numbers, then we have a lot more success with the teams that are owning the actual process to be able to align those particular goals with the particular journey mapping goals with what's going on at the strategic level of the company. So we find that tends to help. We're starting with the customer success team, making sure that there's buy-in from the top executive team and that there's alignment. And we find that if there are ambassadors in each of these different departments, typically we'll start with customer success, but then we venture out into like implementation. If that's not owned by the CS team, we back into sales and also into marketing. So we kind of start with the middle piece of the journey, if you will, and then we sort of back into the other areas. But having these ambassadors in each of those different teams, marketing, sales, etc., really helps with making sure that we're kind of tying that out to those strategic goals.
Yeah, and what I
Thank
would
you.
throw in here, I've written down a couple of things to add to what's already been said. And I would say when I look at the question again and I see how do we make sure it's aligned with the business strategy and goals, I tend to feel like if I haven't shifted the strategy and goals, I haven't really done my job, because I think that really great, whether it's journey mapping or service blueprinting or task analysis, when it's done really well, I think it can get a company to rethink some of its strategies, goals, priorities, sometimes the products and services themselves, and other things. So I think, to me, start with the buy-in to even do the exercise, and in some ways that might be to make sure to work with teams on what are their guesses and assumptions about the customer experience, about the user journey, because usually what people think customers do is not really their real experience. We saw that when I did the webinar with all y'all, and we did that. We looked at some customer journey maps that were out on the web as examples, and most of them looked completely made up. They did not come from observational research at all. And so very often we might be coming in and talking to people about, okay, you have personas or customer journey maps, and these might be things you guessed at or workshopped, but now it's probably a great time to do the correct generative qualitative research and the observations so that we can find the real customer journey based on what's been observed and not based on what's been guessed or heard or workshopped, because very often that stuff ends up being assumptive and incorrect.
Thank you. And actually, you all mentioned about having, the buy-ins in some sort of getting the ambassadors before doing the journey mapping. It is really great when you have people who understand the value, but well, what if they don't? So what do you do with that?
They're probably not hiring us.
Okay, but what if they already hired you?
Yeah.
It's important to show what's working, what's not. I quite often look at start, stop, improve. And this is why doing the internal stakeholders, journey map, which I know is not your typical customer journey map, but it actually highlights the areas of, and it can be done with any process. I mean, I use customer journey mapping, just journey mapping in general, very differently, and I have for probably the last 20 years. I actually, when I was a clinician, I used to do it with my patients, to be honest, because they're also going on a journey and they are technically customers or clients, even though they have an illness, and they're relying on me and my knowledge, they still need to agree and buy into what I'm saying. It's the same thing in a business, whether it's B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter. We're dealing with human behavior here. So as soon as we sort of understand what we are doing internally and where we can improve, or what we're doing, and highlighting those areas, and then taking that to executive team, taking it to a leadership team. Not every business, and especially my business, have customer success teams. Some of them are just very small teams, and that they're the sales team or they're the marketing team. So it's giving them the tools as well, no matter what size, small, medium, or corporate, to be able to make those decisions. So that's why, internally it's really important. Also doing a lot of risk analysis. So I use them in a way, and I think I discussed this in a previous webinar that I did with you guys, looking at the emotional and the behavioral touch points of when a journey map is successful, but also plotting on that same map when it's not, and identifying those risks and how we can change that. Once someone sees that and they see what the outcome and the goals are, they tend to then want to know more. So that's how I work with it.
Thank you. And Amy, I noticed that you were nodding on Leanne's words, so probably you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, being able to define what those outcomes are is really important. Again, a lot of the companies that we work with, the metrics and basically defining kind of what the measures are across the journey and how the journey is going to impact the bottom line it's just not defined. It's something that, I think as companies are going on a journey to look at the customer experience, the reason that they're doing that is because something is not working. And I think back to Leanne's point, usually these are the folks that are hiring us because they're like, okay, we know something's wrong. We just don't know how to tackle it. And so one of the things that I recommend and that we do is the journey mapping process for us is really important because it helps us to sort of look at, each of the different phases of that post-sales journey. Again, we're more on that post-sales side, and really define the process and the playbooks that are going to lead to those outcomes, lead to those metrics and those KPIs and those results. And so, which is really the impact that the company is looking for. So we do a lot of baselining when we come in. We look at all of the different survey feedback that companies may have. We look a lot at the metrics, trying to get a baseline so that we can show, okay, here's where you're at today. Now, how do we build on that? And basically, once we implement these journey mapping processes and the playbooks that go along with each of these phases of the journey, we're looking more at those critical loyalty drivers across the journey that are going to have kind of the biggest bang for the resources that we're using along that journey. And then bringing that back, making sure that we're measuring, we're kind of defining what those key metrics are at each of those journey phases, baselining those, and then bringing back the results and building that into the business as kind of the operational rhythm. So we're driving that back up into OKRs. If companies are using OKRs to measure success, and those specific business metrics, so that companies can realize, okay, this is the impact that all of this work that we're doing and putting into the kind of the processes that are embedded within the journey. This is the impact that's having on the bottom line.
Yeah, and I can only add to what's already been said because what's been said is fantastic. A couple of things that I wrote down since the original question was about how do we get that buy-in if we're lacking it. Chances are we know we kind of suck, and so we might have survey scores or NPS or voice of the customer or other things that we're tracking where we know we're not as good as we could be. Maybe sales is struggling to win or retain customers, and as Amy can tell you, customer support is always overloaded. So we've got things that clue us into we could be better. We could be a better fit for our customers. And I think a lot of companies forget about product market fit once they stop saying they're a startup. So I think we need to always think about that product and service fit for the audience. I also wrote down, why am I here? Which echoes something Amy kind of said. If they're talking to us or considering us or any of the people on today's show, there's a goal, there's a problem that needs to be fixed, there's something that needs to be improved. So why am I here? What can I fix for you? Some people know my clients call me Mary Poppins because I fly in, fix everything I can, sing a few songs, and fly away to where I'm needed next. So why am I flying in to you? And have we observed our customers? I always go back to that because, again, I find that so much data tends to come from customer support or voice of the customer or surveys. But I sometimes find, have we watched these people doing things? Oh, well, no, we found a few in a coffee shop. No, an engineer called a few and asked them what they want. Not the same thing. And so I'm usually pushing on that. And like everybody else also said, focusing on that risk, the risk of not deeply understanding the correct journeys and sub-journeys and tasks, because we want to be evidence-based and we want to know the why. We want to know the root causes so that we can best address them both for the benefit to the customers and to the business.
Thank you, ladies. And you, Amy, already mentioned the question. Some sort of my next question here. You mentioned the metrics that you discuss with your clients, on the way before building the journey. So actually, my next question is, what are the challenges you see? You probably mentioned some, but it would probably make more sense to sum them up somewhat. What are the challenges you see in identifying relevant metrics to track and measure in journey mapping initiatives? And actually, what metrics do you use before or after? Because this is the question that we receive like a lot. Amy, so since you mentioned that topic, but probably you will be the first.
Yeah, we look a lot at the revenue numbers, especially in SaaS. So net revenue retention is really important to us, and we also are looking at we use Net Promoter a lot as we're working with companies. So if we're looking, and we measure by stage. So for example, in onboarding, we're looking at time to value. And making sure that, again, beginning, measuring that before we get into the journey mapping exercise, and then measuring what the impact is once is very much. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Our process is very much aligned to a framework, and so we do a lot of work with defining playbooks and then obviously building that into the Uexpressia tool, and then taking that a bit further and automating that through some other automation system work that we do. And typically we're able to kind of plug in what those input metrics are at the very beginning of each of the onboarding phases, and again getting that baseline number and then moving that baseline number through the journey. So I think the big ones that we start with, our recommendation is start small. Don't have a lot of don't get too heavy on the metrics. What we find with the companies that we're working for is the data is one of the biggest struggles and challenges that companies have, is kind of getting the data and actually being able to sort of move that into some sort of actionable and insights type of format. So we recommend start simple, keep the KISS principle, keep it simple. Start with just having a few metrics at each of those journey phases, understand what those are at the beginning of your journey mapping work, and then understand how you're moving the needle, quarter after quarter, whatever that business rhythm is that you're measuring in.
Thank you.
Yeah, something I would jump in and add is I'm always looking for what's most actionable, because I find sometimes teams or companies make a customer journey map and then it kind of gets filed away, or we hang it on the wall but nobody's really looking at it. So the question is, did this customer, and this is not measurable with a metric in a sense, but did this customer journey map affect strategy? Did it affect decisions? Did it affect priorities? Did other teams take it and run with it? Did product managers work from it? Did UX designers and researchers work from it? If we made a customer journey map and then it really didn't get looked at later, that's probably a sign that it wasn't actionable and we need to scrap it, probably redo it or fix it, because it should be an artifact that is carried through other aspects of our work and project. So even though that's not necessarily a measurable thing, that's something we should be looking for. I also made a note about bringing things back to the customer and user. I think it's very obvious that we're going to measure a lot of things the business wants to see, whether it's leading or lagging indicators. We've got our revenue, we might have some North Star metrics, we might have loyalty. I like to look at cost of acquisition. I want to see people acquiring customers better because we've built better products and services, and it's now faster and cheaper for us to win customers. Certainly, I want to look at however the company tends to measure loyalty or retention, but we can't just measure these things. Again, it all comes back to action. In my book, I talk about a company who, on their B2B side, they had an NPS of 50 when people signed the contract, and when it was time for the contract to renew, their NPS was negative 25. Now, I don't love NPS coming from the UX world, but that's a real sign that we need to do a lot more investigation. That should be the project that sells itself. But the problem was the company felt like, well, we'll just find more new customers. And so I think it's up to people like the three of us and many of you in the audience who might be in more of that consulting and advising role to say, That's not good enough. It's not good enough to win these people, alienate them, and then go try to win more people. So I'm not going to answer the typical metrics, but I will say that I tend to look more at customer and user metrics because they're ignored. Time on task can be one. I want to see people reducing the number of errors they have. I want to see fewer calls to customer support. So I like to sometimes measure some of these ones that people sometimes remember and sometimes forget.
I'd like to add to that too. Really, both actually great responses. One thing that we measure is conversions. We like to keep it simple, to be honest. And I always say, you know, as humans, we are actually very simple, but we love complicating things, and especially in sales, especially in business and marketing, we really do. So we look at conversions, but I'm not just talking about a conversion to a sale. I'm looking at every single phase of the journey map. So we generally build between 5 to 8. Don't like to do any more than 8, to be honest, because it does overcomplicate the journey map, and looking at each of the conversions of each of the phases. So not whether someone's actually bought something, have they actually engaged with us in a certain way that will take them to the next step? If they have, fantastic. If they haven't, why not? And to sort of talk about what Debbie was saying, I'm very much in observing. As a behavioral scientist and neuroscientist, we need to observe behavior. I quite often teach that we are all accidental liars. There is expected behavior of us. So when we are asked a question, we tend to go with what the expectation is, rather than what is really happening. But when you're observing subconscious behavior, that doesn't lie. So looking at what's happening and then making adjustments based on each of those. The other thing we do is look at nudging. So at each, and this is more cognitive neuroscience effect, where we look at what nudges we can actually put in place. So what cognitive biases are working to be able to then get someone to nudge them technically, which is ethical behavior, to the next step. So is it something like loss aversion bias, something like peak end rule, endowment effect, these kinds of things that will actually encourage someone to step through. So we actually measure the behavior, we measure the conversions.
Thank you, Debbie, for supporting Leanne. And we actually have a question here in the chat. We have a question in the chat. Can we get this conversion of funnel tracking into Google Analytics or what platforms are best to view conversions at each stage of the funnel?
Is it that to me? Yeah. I mean, it can be anyone. Want to answer that? Sorry, I just took over.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Well, the question appeared while you were speaking, so I believe this is for you.
To go back to conversion. Yeah, we actually set up we actually in Expressia, we actually set it up, to be honest. I like to keep things simple. So we actually create these conversion tables in Expressia. Also, we do use them in Google. We can use them in Google Sheets or within your CRM. So there's many CRMs out there. I do have some that I find from a behavioral and persona and profiling perspective that are better. One that I use is ActiveCampaign. I have no affiliation with them. It's just something that fits in well with the behavioral science behind sales, behind forecasting, that we can actually measure it. So really keeping the tool simple. So something like, in terms of Google Analytics, not really, because we are looking at it independently. We're looking at something that we need to then measure from behaviors. Although we can look at conversions from whether there's any kind of conversions coming from websites or social media, but it's actually more from the process of the journey map rather than the, not going to say destination, or the platform that they're coming from. It is always good In fact, it's good practice and really gold standard to know where the information and where the client or the customer is coming from. But that is only the tip of the iceberg. Once they have actually created a interest with you, can you convert that along the way, each phase, ultimately to a sale, post-purchase? So a lot of people think customer journey mapping in a sales environment is, oh, I've got the deal, I've got the purchase, excellent. That's the end of the story. It's actually the beginning of the next phase, because we need to look at what's happening beyond that, and if they are becoming an advocate for the business or an ambassador or referring, and on that ongoing sustainable business. So we've got to look beyond that. So even though we can use these certain analytical tools, it's only to a certain part of the journey map. We need to be able to measure those behaviors separately and record them.
Debbie, I noticed the mysterious smile. Mind sharing your perspective?
The mysterious smile was actually someone who's watching, added me on LinkedIn and asked me a funny question privately. So I think that was the mysterious smile. So thanks to the nice person who sent me the message, and I wrote him back. But yeah, it's totally agree with, I'm all about the behavioral science, even though I'm not officially a behavioral scientist. So I love everything that's being said. And again, to me, you've just got to add more qual with your quant. You know, we can always measure more things and find more numbers for things and draw charts and say this went up or down, but why? And so that's where we want to make sure we're coming back to not just looking at the voice of the customer and some of that more secondary stuff, but really super primary. And I'm all about the observational research. I want to see people doing things in our ecosystem, outside of our ecosystem, to really understand their tasks and behaviors, so that when someone says, what's up with these numbers, I've got the why.
Thanks. And Amy, I noticed that you were, smiling and nodding. So probably you agree with what was said, but maybe do you have something to add?
No, I think they summed it up really nicely. But I just agreeing with the sentiment from both Leanne and Debbie.
Okay, then I have the next question, because you all mentioned the simplicity, that you all are, for simplicity in, in metrics and measuring the impact. But okay, let's imagine the situation when we have limited resources and, okay, when we have limited resources, and is it that the time when we can get more simple, or maybe this is the time when the analysis and measurement will get more complicated? What are the strategies to be used in such situations? Sounds too complicated.
Well, I'll start. I don't know if this is exactly what we're getting at, but I can at least talk about how this shows up for us in our business. Limited resources is something that I think we are all hearing these days, especially in the sector that we work with. And where journey mapping has really helped us is to basically streamline the processes across the journey, because typically what ended up happening, I think, is during I don't know what we call it, the bubble, the pandemic bubble, companies were throwing resource at problems. And this was leading to a lack of efficiency across the business and the processes. And so you had a lot of gaps that were being filled across the customer journey with people rather than with efficiency. And so what we're seeing is these companies now that are, scaling back on unfortunately on people resources. Luckily, a lot of these people are finding great new jobs and new homes and rediscovering themselves. So I think there's always positive that comes out of that. And they're really looking at figuring out, okay, now that we only have a handful of people on a team that perhaps was much broader in the past. How do we really dive into the processes that are happening along the customer journey to ensure that there's efficiency built in without sacrificing the actual experience of the customer. And so I think this is actually a time where journey mapping is helping, at least helping to serve our customers as a way to drive more efficiency into the business, because rather than, again, throwing people at it and they're not being any sanity around it, our customers are like, okay, now we've got people that are doing like, we're not sure of what the roles and responsibilities are across the journey. So we're doing a lot of organizational design work, and then coming into the journey, working with those people to come in to build out the journeys to drive, again, that efficiency across the experience that they're having.
Leanne, do you have something to share about the strategies you can use to overcome limited resources, or which I forgot to mention before?
Yeah, look, what Amy was saying was great. And people are tightening the belt, and they need to, and unfortunately in these times. However, we still need to operate, and business still need to operate. So what can we do? And I think when we, especially if we do the internal journey mapping, we can actually see what resources that we're actually using and what we're not. And, you know, I quite often will put together an internal map or build an internal map for a client to look at the tools, software, hardware, whatever they've got, and what is being utilized properly and what isn't. And, you know, quite often we can save thousands, quite often tens of thousands of dollars on you know, resources that we're just not using. So we can then shift that money elsewhere. So creating a lean environment, but not just, I mean, I know that's a bit of a cliche, and I really don't like cliches, but it's being effective and lean. And so looking at that first, so moving and manipulating the resources that you have, firstly. So that would be the first strategy that I would suggest. And then looking at how we can leverage what we've got and the expertise and depth of knowledge within an organization to then encourage people to buy from us, and putting in plans and strategies where we can offer different programs, services, and sort of using go-to-market strategies that is a little bit more palatable to keep them engaged with the organization, but they're not spending thousands of dollars, lots of money, thousands of dollars to then, which they don't have. So it's creating a strategy to keep them engaged regardless of the level of investment.
Yeah, and what I wrote down that to add to what's been said, because I certainly can't disagree, is I think when we have that the poor economy or limited resources time, to me, that's where we have to pay more attention to prioritization of initiatives and projects. We heard a lot in the layoffs that we overhired. And my thought was, well, if we really overhired, then all of the people you laid off, you shut down their projects, right? You didn't give people those projects to also do. We shut down those projects because they weren't important. And of course, in many cases, no, they didn't shut down those projects. They laid people off and then asked people to pick up that work. So I think where we have those limited resources, we have to remember that our staff, workers, consultants, whoever they are, our teams are not factory assembly line robots. They are humans. They still need work-life balance. We cannot overwork these people. And if we are going to make cuts to budgets, to personnel, whatever it is, then we have to make cuts to projects, which raises up the need for better prioritization. I wrote scrap stakeholder ego projects, scrap anything based on wild guesses and, gee, wouldn't it be cool if a thing did a thing and maybe users would like it? Or, hey, what I've been asked sometimes, hey, we want to build a thing. Can you reverse engineer a reason for us to do it? No. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this should work. So I would say in limited resources time, let's improve our prioritization, which again goes back to that knowledge and evidence. And some of that will be in our customer journey mapping or behavioral analyses and other evidence and data.
Thank you. You just, hit my personal trauma with what you said. No, this is a good thing. Okay, so let's move on to the journey mapping. I like the effects you use, actually, Debbie. So let's move to the journey mapping. It's not a secret that this is just one of the techniques that you can use to improve CX. Well, not a surprise even to me, the person who works for a software company who develops a journey mapping tool. But nevertheless, when we talk about the impact of journey mapping, how can it be isolated from other factors affecting customer experience? Because obviously there is something else that is going on with journey mapping. How can we make sure that the impact is just because of journey mapping? Leanne, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, okay. Well, I actually missed some of it because it just dropped in and out. I don't know if anyone else had that same. Yeah, you did. Yeah. So I think I've got the question here. So so basically what you're after is how do we know what's actually working and what isn't? Is that right, Veronica? Just that I missed a lot of that because it fell in and out.
Yeah, it's the question's also in the chat, and it says, how can the impact of customer journey, you've got it.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I'm happy for you to read it to me, Debbie. That's
Hold on, let me voice act it for you.
Yeah.
How can the impact of journey mapping be isolated from other factors affecting customer experience?
Yeah.
Press 1.
That's awesome. Thank you. Loud and clear. That actually is a little bit tricky, to be honest, because we're actually encouraging any of the behaviors that are happening we're motivating with a journey map for this to actually happen. So it is hard to actually isolate what is impacted by the journey map and what's not. But what I find happens is if we design the phases and we're starting to get an emotional response from customers and we're getting conversions and we're able to measure, it generally then impacts and motivates and has a flow-on effect for other parts of the business. So once we have things set in stone and we have a map that is working well for the organization, we find that other areas of the business just tend to prosper, and we can optimize that. But from my perspective, when we are doing journey mapping, we're just really looking at the impact of that, not what's happening at the bigger picture, because we're trying to get results from what we've created with our phases, and then motivating to do other things. But for us, we are isolating the journey map.
Amy, what do you actually do when you work with your clients?
Sure. So I think our approach, and Leanne, I totally totally agree with a lot of what you said. I think where we differ a little bit is that we're typically coming in at a bit at the CEO level. So a lot of the sales work that we're doing is happening to CEOs of companies. And so we are very much aligned with that strategy. And a lot of the work that we're doing from the journey and mapping out the customer journey is basically tying that journey back to the strategy, back to those business metrics. So as we're looking at the impact, you can see like the CEOs, the executives across these various groups, again, because to your point, Leanne, it is holistic. I mean, I think it's sort of hard to separate the two, because the purpose of the journey mapping work is really to have this broader impact on the customer experience, which then should drill back into the overall experience that the organization or success that the organization is having. So I think for us, it's the way it shows up for our clients is that it is part of a much larger sort of strategic program that we're working alongside them with to map out what that journey looks like across the different phases, to tie those key metrics kind of back into the strategy metrics, the metrics that that the business is measuring to be successful. So to us, it's holistic and a bit combined rather than breaking that out a bit different than how Leanne is working with customers.
Yeah, I agree in that it's there are a lot of things in our work that's hard to measure precisely. Like if someone says, "What's the value of a product manager?" Oh my God, I can't give you a number. And this is one of those things. What's the value of a good or bad customer journey map? I can't give you a number, but I wrote a couple of things down, and I remind people that if you are doing customer journey mapping, service blueprints, task analysis, anything that kind of fits into this mapping bucket, this is ultimately the team's source of truth, if not a larger source of truth across departments or even the company. And if it's not being used as such, then that's something to notice. But if the source of truth starts to drag us in the wrong directions, which we're going to see, unfortunately, in a more lagging way down the road, then we've got to understand that there's a problem with our evidence, our source of truth, whatever we want to call it. Also, I remind people to take a look at what's going on with this, the map or the blueprint, whatever it is. And how does this tie back to to your company values? Sorry, not customer, to your company values. Because I tend to see companies say, well, here's a customer journey map. Where can we make them do this and make them do that? And let's give them a pop-up and let's interrupt them here and let's force them over here and let's make this mysterious and difficult. And I go, congratulations, you can definitely manipulate a customer into doing more of what you want. Does that match your company values? Let's make sure we're still holding this up against the values, and that the values aren't just a poster on the wall. If we say we have, everybody say it with me, empathy, that goes with this effect, empathy. If we say we have empathy, if we say we have integrity and honesty and transparency and DEI and accessibility, we have to live that stuff. And also strategy based on the customer journey map. If we do a customer journey map, and especially an optimized, streamlined future version, and we don't make much change, we probably didn't do it right. And then finally, did we change? I think if you do a customer journey map and hopefully you get some tough love self-awareness out of it, something should change. And if we don't change, I again think we did something wrong there.
Okay, gotta be honest. I missed the part where Debbie was speaking because, well, the internet connection is trying to kill me today, probably. So, gotta be honest, first of all, I expected some silver bullet. Well, probably that was in Debbie's speech. If it was, just can you repeat that for me? If there, Debbie, we cannot hear you. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I keep worrying everyone can hear the fan right next to me. But no, I don't have a silver bullet. It's really more about keeping an eye on your internal activities as you are doing them, looking for making sure that a customer journey map inspires us to change, and making sure that as we make change, we're sticking to our company values, unless those are crappy, fluffy values like some companies I won't name.
And actually,
I love that. I was going to say, I love, Debbie, that you tie it out to the values. I think that's so crucial. And it's a point that a lot of, I think sometimes it goes unnoticed. And I think this is a bit of a theme that's run throughout today, because Leanne, you talk a lot about the internal stakeholder mapping. Debbie, you talked a lot about about culture. It's all, I mean, it's sort of, a bit of a unit, and I'll just jump off of what Debbie said. The journey map is it is like this living, breathing. Once you're done with this work, it's never done. It's a living. It should be this kind of living, breathing organism that lives within your company. That you can continue as the product changes, as roles change, as the journey changes, etc., you're going back in and you're using that as a bit of a source of truth, to help ensure that any changes that are happening in the organization, are documented, and you're thinking about that. You've always got that sort of customer lens on the business, and your journey maps are your way to facilitate that.
Yeah, and that internal stakeholder map that I was talking about exactly is for that. We can talk about our own strategies, our mission, our core values. And what I find is when I do this with clients, they actually really love it because they never look at the internal process or the internal journey. And it actually gives them that drive to go, right, this is how I'm feeling and this is what we need to do. How can we make that better for then our clients or our customers or whatever it is? So it actually provides a lot of encouragement and motivation to stick by the core values of or the culture of an organization and achieve. There's goals and objectives that people can achieve, and this is what we need to do to get there, and this is what potentially could happen for us, and we won't get there, so let's make sure that doesn't happen. What's the risk? And then we flip that, and then we do it externally for our customers.
Okay, just checking the internet connection. Thank you. And we actually mentioned it at the very beginning of today's event, the topic of stakeholders, how to get their buy-in for the journey mapping initiative. But when we talk about the impact, when you already have been working with the clients for a while and you see some results from journey mapping, how do you communicate it to the stakeholders, so that they understand, like, hey, that was a great opportunity, we're glad we used it, and this is like super helpful for us because of whatever.
Maybe I can start. I'll start with an example, and this is with a smaller client that we're working with, but I think it's really impactful. So we worked with the customer success team, and we basically mapped out the adoption phase of the journey. That was the one that is one of the ones that they're pretty fully accountable for. And the outcome of working with them through this process was that they were bringing so much value through the new processes that they were creating within their organization, and the metrics that they were able to report on, that the executive team, they were meeting with them, I think, on a quarterly basis, with all of the new process that we brought into the business. The executive team is now meeting with them twice a month, and they've got the CEO's attention. The CEO is like, I don't want to meet with you quarterly. I don't want to meet with you monthly. I want to meet with you every 2 weeks. And could you please use this process to bring this information and the voice of the customer back into the business? So before, they were just a very small team, like no one listened to them. They were like, we are not empowered. Nobody even has any idea what we do. Moving them within 6 months into a team that now meets with the executive team twice weekly, talking about their entire portfolio of customers. So that's just one example, I think, of the power where it really impacts, the people, but also the customer. So kind of that internal and external. I think this is sort of the not really like a tangible, measurable, like this is the metric that we're measuring, but the way that this team feels. They were like, we have a voice now, like we are the voice of the customer within the business. And that is, I think, and the team I work with. So that's I think a good example of the impact that has on companies.
Leanna, noticed you nodding.
No, brilliant example. That's fantastic. But yeah, I agree. I mean, if you can show results, and especially when coming back to what I said previously about measuring conversions, and it's not just conversion to sale, it's conversion at each phase. People want to know about it. The executives want to know about it. The leadership team wants to know about it. The board wants to know about it. The one thing that I love using also is the presenter function within your Expressure as well, which is really good because you're actually immersing everybody into the software and into, I just hit the microphone, into the map. And that I find is quite powerful, rather than just having as an image, a PNG, JPEG, or a PDF, but actually then moving things around. I talk a lot about behaviors and emotions, and Debbie mentioned empathy. Absolutely. Everything we do is based around ethical behavior, influencing ethically. Oh, yep, that's the sparkle empathy filter. Yeah, fantastic. Right on cue. When we map emotional touch points, and I use the emojis or the emoticons, and then we can actually in real time, and as Amy said, it's a dynamic document. It absolutely is. The map is dynamic regardless of what you're doing. And then you move it and say, well, if we didn't do this, this would be the result. And we move it. I actually change it from a green to a red, basically using, in a way, the standard traffic light system that we just are used to seeing. And with those emotions, it captures people's attention. Well, we don't want that. How do we maintain that journey? What can we do to prevent from not converting at this particular phase? Once we become really interactive and we can show those results, even if we do it very, very quickly, because we're time poor, I find the buy-in from executives and from both internal and external stakeholders is very, very high.
Yeah, and just to throw in my 2 cents on this, I think the main thing that I want to add, since so many great things have already been said, is, again, since I work more in task analysis than traditional customer journey maps, the task analysis always comes as a pair. We have the current state flow, and then we have the optimized flow, and then it gets really easy to show the stakeholders and other people involved, like, this is what it's like now, and this is the complexity from the user's perspective. This is how hard it is for them. This is the workarounds and band-aids they've put on their situations. And then based on our problem finding, problem solving, our strategic approach, this is that streamlined desired future state, and they can see the visual difference between them. They can compare. Obviously, we're giving them other artifacts as well, whether that's reporting, or some people want lists and spreadsheets of pain points and problems that they can solve. We also include some of our high-level solution ideas, and we say, here's the pain points and problems and what we would do about them. You can do what you want to do about them. But I think that when we give them these 2 maps, there's a good kind of visceral reaction to, oh, holy cats, we didn't know it was this complicated, and we didn't know it sucked this bad. And, oh, wow, this seems interesting. Let's talk more about how this can be streamlined and improved for the users. So I would say that's some of the things we do. Meow, says Julia.
Thank you. And actually, I believe this is it for the questions that we had. We have one more question from our attendee. Is there any specific suggestion for B2B versus B2C in terms of metrics?
I think this was around the conversion.
Probably somewhere over there.
Yeah. For not really. I don't know if that's what you want. We still measure. I mean, the map and the journey is slightly different, obviously. What I think we need to also remember when it's B2B is we are still, from from a sales perspective, and the work that I do, we're still engaging with a person. Quite often I'll actually say, well, we're going to be selling equipment or selling a service or product, whatever it is. We're not selling it to a building. And a lot of people, now obviously we're not selling to a building, but they don't realize that it's actually a person that we are selling to. So this person we need to then identify and profile, which is also another reason why using the profiling tool and the personas is important. You know, looking at whether they are decision makers, looking at whether they have an influence within the organization, whether they can be your secret sales force within the organization as well. So even though it's still a person, people buy from people, regardless of whether it's a B2C organization, B2C scenario, or a B2B. The map itself and the journey itself is slightly different, but in terms of what we measure, very similar. There really isn't much difference, is what I'm going to answer to that.
Thank you. Amy, I saw you somewhat reacted.
I actually was reacting to Sally, who was from my team. Yes, we were explaining that there were a lot of features in usFreshia that we're not using today that we need to be deep diving a bit more into. Yeah, that was apologies if that was misread.
Yeah, I'll jump in then. So we tend to work with some two-sided marketplaces, and that means they've got both B2B and B2C. Sometimes there's additional players as well. There might be partners or resellers, and so there's this larger ecosystem. And ultimately, I can't say what the magic, sparkly metrics are. I can only remind teams that they can't just look at the B2B because that's where the money comes in. The money stops coming in if the B2C isn't there. You know, YouTube needs content creators and content consumers. Indeed needs people to post jobs and people to apply to jobs. All of these two-sided marketplaces require the entire ecosystem to work. And if these companies only focus on where they think their bread is buttered, they're going to miss the larger opportunity for customer satisfaction, loyalty, and growth. And to me, they're all the customers. Everybody is the customer because they make our ecosystem run. So I can't say, oh, this is the exact metric, but I know for B2B, a lot of our clients might use NPS and things like that. And for B2C, they're looking at, did we make any money from these people? But again, I think we have to go deeper into I remind people, take a look at metrics that imply early success. If this is Indeed, how do we know that the job poster had early success? How do we know that the job applicant felt a sense of early success? Is it jobs that match them? Is it jobs they applied to? Is it jobs they heard back from? Is it jobs they got interviewed by? There's got to be something that we can measure that says, apart from all the other business things we want to measure, our customers and users are experiencing success.
Yeah, that's such a great answer. And I'll jump in. We have a client, you reminded me, Debbie, that we have a client, it's not necessarily B2C, but it's in the developer world where developers are the kind of the end user persona, and they drive everything, because if the developers aren't actually adopting this technology, and it's more of an open source type of technology, then ultimately companies aren't the company that we work with, they're not being successful. So it's really key that we're measuring kind of what is that end user experience, to ensure that people are continuing to kind of move from the free version and then convert over to some sort of paid version, and then kind of move the needle where there's more and more users that are adopting. So it's that kind of freemium move through the ecosystem. And there's such a large focus on the B2B, which is, you've got a ton of different stakeholders that you're working with in the B2B community, but also you've got this developer community that's the foundation and the basis of the user base. And so if you're not kind of looking, I sort of look at that as like a B2C, and then the more enterprise sale as the B2B, but they're feeding each other. And so you've got to really look at the metrics of, and again, there's lots of different ways, as Debbie mentioned, that you can measure that, but kind of looking at the constituency of what that looks like across those different personas is so critical to the overall success.
Thank you so much. That's it for, and actually now, I have one quick question for you to end this discussion. So, do you measure the impact of journey mapping for your clients? Okay, Debbie, I know that you do not use journey mapping.
Yeah, again, it's hard to measure it in an isolated thing. I can't say thanks to us doing this map, ecosystem map, task analysis, these other amazing things happened. It's easier for me to point at the larger project in general. Thanks to us doing this research and having this knowledge of which the customer journey map or other artifact is just a document or an artifact reflecting that knowledge. Thanks to having this knowledge, we were able to do this. So I probably tend to point more at the larger effort and the research and the knowledge and the evidence rather than, hey, we've got this one document and it changed our lives. It's more of the larger, great research changed our lives.
I have to say, in terms of sales and the sales process that we actually map out for our clients, we see a significant increase in sales and in revenue and conversions based on the journey maps that we create. But I'm not saying that's because of us. It's a team effort. It's brainstorming. It's spending time together. It's doing research, like Debbie said. It's looking at the internal mapping. It's then doing the external mapping. It's looking at the strengths, the skills gaps. But I've got a number of case studies where journey mapping has significantly impacted the outcome of the business and in terms of revenue. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll kind of build on what Leanne said, because ultimately we're on that post-sale space. So after the sale happens, we're really looking at the retention, making sure that expansion is or that net revenue retention, right, is as high as possible. So those are the metrics that we're able to use to sort of measure success. Again, it's that holistic, as Debbie talked to. It's very holistic because it's the work that comes out of the metrics that are a result of doing all of the journey mapping and the process work that goes underneath the hood of that ends up resulting in those higher revenue numbers. So less churn, higher retention, however you want to measure that. Net revenue retention is a big one for us, and increases in CSAT, depending on what companies are using. Net Promoter is one that we use a lot. That's kind of part of our program. We do VOC work, but bringing that, those metrics are the ones that we typically see after we do the journey mapping work with customers that are up and to the right.
And I just wanted to thank Veronica, because I don't know if you planned this or not, and whether you did or didn't, it's genius. But like, you've got me working more focused on products and services and experiences and what we're going to be delivering to potential users and current customers. And then you've got Leanne focusing on the sales, which is that next larger step. And then you've got Amy on the next end of that. So I think it's great that we've had representation from all those different areas.
Oh, that's time for your magic,
Great
things
job.
that you do. Exactly. Thank you so much, Amy, Leanne, and Debbie. It is such a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure to meet with you here. Thank you for finding time to virtually meet.
If you want to see more events like this, make sure to check the upcoming ones at expressia.eventbrite.com or check the recordings we've got on this channel. Take care, and I will see you around.